Cheers.
All right, cheers.
Cheers.
All right.
Okay. Oh, this is really good. Wow.
Yeah. So I have made an opinion,
Yeah.
probably in the past 2 months, that Daiginjo is probably my favorite type of sake now.
Okay. Daiginjo.
Yeah.
Do you know what Daiginjo is? Can you explain it to our special guest here, who is my father?
I mean, maybe. So if it's my understanding that Daiginjo is like the highest quality, right?
Yeah. It's most of the rice grain has been polished off at that point, so it's below 50. It's below 60% or 50. No, it's below 50%. So like they take the rice grains and they just like shave off the impurities.
Okay, so it's like really what's the term for that? Refined?
Yeah, it's really refined.
Yeah,
Only
yeah.
the good stuff is left.
Yeah.
But Father,
Yes.
welcome to our channel.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to do this because I can't see your beautiful face. So I think if I
fine.
do this.
Oh, it's so nice to be seen.
Yeah. So what do you think of this sake? You don't really.
I think it's delicious. I've only had sake a couple of times, each time with you.
Yeah.
And but I think so far this is my favorite.
Oh, good. Awesome. Yeah. Well, this is really good. So we had 3 sakes today, and
Yep.
Austin, you wanted to drink this one. Can you explain why?
Yeah, so Arthur, you presented me with 3 different bottles, and it's kind of been a little bit of a tradition on the channel to like talk about where the bottles are from. And so usually when we drink, we're like, yeah, this is from Akita, this is from Kyushu, this is from wherever. So I was looking at all 3 of the bottles, and I was informed that this one is from Hyogo.
Yeah. Right.
And Hyogo Ken is pretty near and dear to my heart because that was where my first experience in Japan was. My host family that I stayed with is from Hyogo. And so I still have a pretty heavy attachment. In fact, Arthur got to meet my host family. They
At the wedding.
yeah, they
At his
came.
wedding.
Yeah. So I'm still very close. I mean, my host mom's kind of like a second mom to me. So
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, she seemed really nice.
Yeah,
I didn't
she's
talk
great.
to her too much, but
she's really great.
so today though, we have a very interesting topic, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on this show is because not just because you're my dad. Who cares about that? Who cares? Yeah, right. No, but if so because you actually came to Japan in the 80s once for a business trip, and then you didn't come back at all, and then your son fell in love with Japan, started living here, and now you've been back here a few times, right?
That's correct.
So I wanted to talk with you today about your experience. What did you do on that business trip? What were your thoughts and how it compares to what life is like now? So do you want to give us the background of your trip?
Sure. So it was 1985, and I was a corporate banker in Germany working for Citibank, and I was the account manager for the BMW group. So because I was kind of specializing in corporate banking for automobile manufacturers, the German Citibank office chose me to attend Citibank's global automotive conference in Tokyo and represent Germany. So that was the reason. There was I think a 4-day conference here. I flew from Munich to Tokyo.
Just to tell you, Des, you should talk to Austin because then your mouth will be right into the mic. Otherwise, your audio level goes down too. You're talking to my friend here.
Yes, all right. Yeah, so it was my first time in Japan, and I didn't know really what I was expecting, but it was a very different place from any place I'd ever been before. In the sense that the initial impression is that a lot of it looks familiar. A lot of, I'd been working in New York City for a year, so you've got skyscrapers, very crowded sidewalks, and a lot of traffic, similar to here. But what you then notice after you start spending some time here is that the way that people behave is quite different. For example, one thing is the way people kind of move seamlessly in large crowds.
Oh yeah,
I always found that fascinating.
Yeah, last time when we went through Shinagawa Station when I was a student here, he was like, "It's like a school of fish, Arthur. They just like turn on a dime and no one collides."
Well, it's so weird. Like how quickly you adapt to that too. Like when you start living here, it's pick it up in a month. And then you're just, you know, one of the people in the crowd, just dodging and weaving
I have to
through.
turn my dad's audio up a little bit.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, should I continue?
No, keep on going.
Okay.
Keep on going.
Well, I learned quickly, for example, not to stop abruptly to allow an elderly person to go in front of you
Oh yeah.
at the foot of the escalators.
Yeah.
I did that one time. And not only did all of the people behind me bump into me,
Yep.
but the elderly person for whom I had stopped to allow it to go looked at me like I was crazy
Yeah.
and stopped. She herself stopped and waited for me to go in front of her.
Yeah.
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 It's a real trip because it's like courtesy here is getting out of their way and not letting someone come first.
Yeah.
You know? That's
Not interrupting the space.
Yeah. It's a really weird concept coming from the West because it's like kind of the opposite. It's like, you know, courtesy, and like probably Europe's the same way, but in the US it's, you know, it's like, okay, you know, after you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And also in at least in Western Europe and the US, being courteous with another person requires that you somehow address them directly.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe look at them in the eye and say, excuse me, would you please go first?
Yeah.
Or, I'm sorry, I almost bumped into you. But there's some kind of personal interaction there, which people in public here seem to avoid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially eye contact. That's
yeah.
a huge one that I think is really avoided here.
So Dad, can you tell me a bit about your trip? Like how long were you in Japan, and what did you do while you were here?
Well, I was in Japan. I think it was 4 or 5 days.
4 or 5 days.
There
okay.
was a session every day where we attended. In a large conference room, all the bankers, and on one day I had to give a presentation, which I think probably took about an hour, and then there were automotive bankers from several countries giving presentations on what it's like in the automotive industry in their country. Then we also had some. I wouldn't say sightseeing, but we had a tour of one of the Japanese automobile manufacturers. I think it was the Nissan plant in Yokohama, which is quite interesting. It was to see the production line was similar to in Germany. Even at that point in time, there were a lot of robots being used to assemble the pieces of the parts of the car. But I found the personnel management aspect of it quite different. So I had been working in Germany for a couple of years at that point. And in Germany, it's a very pro employee, sort of heavily unionized labor force, where an individual employee can get away with a lot. You know, somebody can be sick for 7 or 8 weeks a year, and it's not a problem. And so we were at the plant, and one of the senior managers was telling us about how they operated, and I asked a question. And I said, they were talking about how employees have a job for life. And I said, well, that's that's a wonderful thing, and it's quite interesting, but what do you do in situations where you have an employee who doesn't work hard?
So there's like a seminar, he's listening to this, and he's asking a question to the person presenting, right?
Right, yes. There was an older executive who was up in front and of a large crowd. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, let's say you have an employee who calls in sick a lot, and even when he or she is there, they're very, very slow, and they're just very unproductive. I said, what do you do with that person? How do you, address that situation? And he said to me, we send them to the psychiatric hospital because they must be crazy. And everyone burst out laughing.
Yeah. Well, it just shows you how work ethic is really different, you know?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't know, for me personally, like if I love living here, but if I had to work a regular job here, I'd probably want to quit and leave really quickly.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it, man.
I don't either. Actually, I don't want to get too much into my personal life, but the workplace benefits of people at my school, and I don't think it's unique to my school. I hear similar problems in other schools, and friends who are working for companies. it's a constant struggle here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, I mean, unless you're living under a rock, you're probably aware of, the what's it called? Stigma of workplace culture in Japan. People are overworked, and there's not a lot of benefits that really go down to the employees that like really take care of their mental health, especially. It is getting better. It is getting better. Japan is starting to look at a lot of European countries that have successfully adopted the 4-day work week, for example.
Okay.
But I mean, there's still problems. One example. I'm feeling okay with talking about this because this is something I'm a little bit frustrated. But I wanted to take paternity leave when my child was born, and one of the labor laws here in Japan is you have to use up all of your paid vacation days before you can take paternity leave. Well, that's a big problem,
Right.
because if I take up all my paid vacation days and I get sick later in the year,
Right.
Yeah.
guess what?
Yeah, you don't get paid for that day.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's who invented that rule? That's a terrible rule. Why is that still
A person
exist?
doesn't want dads to take time off to
Yeah,
see their
no,
kids.
no kidding,
Yeah.
no kidding. It just blew me away.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot of room that
Mhm.
needs to
Yeah.
really change for Japan to really catch up with the West in terms of worker health.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess the two things go in hand. Like at the seminar, Dad, the guy who was like, "Oh, we'll send that person to the psychiatric ward because they must be crazy for not for taking all that time off." Like, it's two sides of the same coin, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing, and I think you brought this up where you mentioned that employees are working at the same company for life. So that's something that I think that is really different from the West because,
At least in the U.S.
I think it's really hard to get fired here. So job stability is significantly higher over here than at least compared to the U.S. So I think a lot of people who are working over here don't feel like they're constantly having their boss breathe down their neck and like worried about getting fired all the time.
I see.
So
I see.
there is some good things about working here for sure.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think in the U.S. now it seems that what's happening is that there's even higher turnover among people working for companies.
Yeah.
But because the person wants to change job.
Yeah.
You know, we had the big coronavirus wave of resignations back in 2021. But it seems that, and this surprised me because I worked in Germany for 20 years in banking. And I was used to people who would stay for a long time at a company. But here, people expect to change jobs every few years.
Well, here's
not
the thing.
here, but in the
you know
United
why
States.
though, right? Because if they quit a job, they get a new job, they get a pay increase.
Yeah.
That's the reason.
Yeah.
Like you don't like the majority of people, because I know a lot of people who do this too. They expect to work at a company for 2 years, get some experience, quit, get a similar job at a different company, but then get a 10% pay increase.
I guess
and they just keep on doing that because companies are more willing to pay more for a new hire than to give a raise to a current employee. That's why.
Right.
Well, that's interesting.
But we are getting a little bit off topic.
No, we're talking
we can talk about work. We can talk about work
Yeah.
culture for sure.
Yeah.
In another episode.
Yeah.
But so for you, Dad. So you went to like the so you did this seminar and you were in Japan for 4 days. What else did you do other than going to the seminars and going to the Yokohama plant for Nissan?
Well, I had an appointment at the BMW subsidiary here
Okay.
because they were one of my clients. So that was an interesting meeting. In fact, that morning before I had that meeting, I went to the fish market, which
Tsukiji,
was which it's moved in the meantime.
Yeah,
right?
it's in Toyosu now.
Yeah.
So I went there, and I think everyone always says you must get there very early. So I was there at like 5 a.m, and it was fascinating.
Yeah.
But when I had the meeting that afternoon with the head of BMW Japan, and I told him I had gone to the fish market, he said, "What time did you get there?" And I said, 5. He said, "Oh, you missed it."
Yeah.
It's all over by then.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, because the fish auctioning starts at like 4.
Does it really?
Yeah. Yeah,
Jesus.
because they have to do the auction, they have to prepare the orders, and they have to send them to the stores for that day.
Oh, okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
But yeah, Dad. So what was like what was when you came here back in the 80s when you were, I guess you were around 30 years old at that time, right? 85,
Right. I was
29,
30. Right.
30.
That was
Yeah, yeah.
30. Right. Yeah.
So like we kind of talked about the things that you did, but what was kind of your impression moving around? Like, because you had already traveled around Europe at that time too.
Right.
Been in some countries, you grew up in the States. So what was being in Japan like?
Well, I would say it was difficult in the sense that I speak a couple of different European languages, and I usually can get by with one of them in almost any country in Europe. But here, you couldn't speak with anybody because hardly anyone spoke English, and obviously I can't understand anything of Japanese or even the written Japanese.
Sure.
So that was a huge barrier, not being able to even tell a taxi driver where I wanted to go. If I could say the name of the hotel, that was about it. It was okay when I needed to get back to the hotel because I would just tell him that. But to tell him where I wanted to go, like if I wanted to go to the sumo wrestling stadium to watch a sumo match, I wouldn't know how to say that in Japanese.
Yeah. How did you get there though?
Well, that was also a challenging adventure because back in those days there were no signs in English in the subway or on the street. So I had someone explain to me which line to take and how many stops to go before I needed to get off. But then which I did successfully, but then when I got above ground, I couldn't see the stadium from the subway stop, and there were no signs I could read to tell me which way. So I just walked around for a while and finally managed to find the stadium. So I would say the language barrier was greater here than in any place I'd ever been.
That's interesting.
But on the other hand, I think that I didn't find the one thing that is obvious to me now here when I'm in the last few trips I've come is how people don't look strangers in the eye. They avoid the eye contact. Whereas I don't remember having that impression back in 1985. And
really,
people looked at you in the eye more. You felt?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that they didn't, right? Because why would it have changed in the meantime? On the other hand, it wasn't something that stuck out to me. Maybe back in those days, I didn't look people in the eye either. I don't know.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah. What was another kind of thing that stuck out to you as something that's really different from back in the 80s?
Different from today?
Not different from today, but like different from. Like when you went to Japan in the 80s and you were just like, wow, this place is different.
Yeah. Well, it's very noisy here if you're in the middle of the city. If you walk around Shibuya or Shinjuku, you're constantly being buffeted with not street hawkers, but there's some music being played. There's somebody not saying something to you, but at you as you walk by, holding some flyers or some advertisement. And it's just a lot of noise. That's probably the main thing that I noticed. And also, I mean, having lived in New York City, I was used to large crowds and having to, move out of the way of people as you're negotiating the sidewalk. But I guess the masses here and the fact that people get very close to you without touching you is actually that's actually an interesting point. It seems like the personal space that an individual kind of requires or expects is smaller here.
Yeah.
But the risk that you actually come into physical contact with somebody is lower.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really crazy if you start thinking about it. Like just how crowded, especially on trains, right? You'll notice that especially during rush hour, how like you'll be squished up like sardines inside a train, yet you'll still feel like you are not having your space violated.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
And you'll never have a personal interaction with anyone that you don't know, which is quite interesting. If you're in New York on the subway and you need to get off, it's crowded, you need to get through to the door, you would say, "Excuse me," and you would make yourself known and you would talk to people.
Yeah.
Whereas here, my son taught me this. You just kind of start shuffling about 15 seconds out.
Yeah.
People kind of make a path for you to the door.
It's the I'm gonna get off the train shuffle.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. The best thing. So when you're sitting down and there's like a bunch of people between you and the door, like the first thing you do, you take your bag or you take your backpack and you put it on your lap and start to put all the straps on.
Yeah.
And then that's the cue, and everyone's like, "Oh, okay, this guy's going," and then it just opens up for you.
Yeah. No, it's really cool because, I would say the best way I would describe it is I think there is actually a lot of communication here. Probably the same as it is in New York, but it's mostly nonverbal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because like I remember going to like a business meeting, and I was really annoyed that the guy who was leading the meeting would ask everyone's opinion, and no one would say anything. And then the guy would just say, "Okay, it's decided then," and just go with his decision. But what I noticed was that like people let their opinions be known in their eyes. And so like they were looking at each other. They weren't necessarily like looking at each other, but it was more just like, "Oh yeah, so how do you guys feel about this?" Like that, and you would let it know. So it's like you're still communicating even without using words.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting point. It makes sense to me based on what I've observed now when I think about it in this way. There's a massive amount of nonverbal communication going on, even without any direct contact between people. So in the U.S. or in Western Europe, nonverbal communication would probably include a lot of eyes connecting. You see the person, you read what they're. But here, you don't actually look at the person in the eye. You may notice their eye movements, and you notice. So you're reading a lot in a way where you don't have a direct interaction with someone. Yeah. But they're still communicating a lot. So that, like a school of fish, they all get around the corner and up the escalator without anyone touching each other and without any delays. Things just move seamlessly.
So for you, so you came back here like, it's already been 40 years, Dad. Does that make you feel old? Sorry, 28 years. No. 28 years. It's been 28 years since you came, and then you visited me a few times since then. But now as you come back, do you feel like there's a difference in your impression of Japan back in the 80s versus now when you come back?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because I would think the answer would most certainly have to be yes, but I can't really say that because I couldn't articulate in what way it's different. Because when I came to Japan in 1985, it was an incredibly different place from anything I had ever been used to. Yeah. And when I come now in 2023, it's still incredibly different from any other place I've been. And I think I understand what's going on a little bit better, but it's still, a real mystery.
Yeah.
What's happening.
Yeah, it's really funny. Like we took my son to the bus stop for his school, for his kindergarten. And this was probably like the third time I've done this with my dad. And the woman comes, takes him on, and then closes the door. And as it closing the door, my dad said, "Yeah, they talk at you, but no one ever really talks to you."
Right. Yeah, I know what that's like.
Yeah.
Well, it's almost like a lot of the communication seems almost ceremonial in the sense that someone arrives and says hello to people, but they just kind of shout out some kind of hello without actually interacting personally with anyone. Yeah. And the group all kind of says hello while they're going about their business. And it's kind of like a lot of ceremonial communication, at least the verbal communication, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would agree with you in that. Like, I mean, before we eat, we always say itadakimasu. Right. When we leave, we say gochou-sama, right? Because there's a lot of ceremony here. And it used to be really weird for me, just like everybody would say the same thing at the same time. Yeah. And now I'm totally used to it now. And it actually almost feels kind of like in Japanese, you say samishi, it feels almost kind of like lonely or like, oh, I miss that.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Because I don't know, that's just how I feel. Because otherwise, things are just kind of like,
it's kind of funny that. So I have kind of a different experience with that. That's never felt weird to me.
Oh, really?
And I think the reason for that is, so I grew up Catholic.
Oh yeah.
So you'd go to Catholic mass all the time. So it's like, you're used to just like everybody saying the same thing all the time, right? And so when I came over here, it just felt like really natural to me. So yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So I didn't grow up Catholic. My dad grew up Greek Orthodox, but you never went to the church, right?
No, I did. When I was a boy, sure. Until I, got out of high school, we always went to the Greek Orthodox service. But they don't have. There's not a lot of speaking in unison among the congregation.
Really? Okay.
No.
Oh, okay.
I see.
Yeah.
But that reminded me of something else I wanted to mention, which I thought was quite interesting in terms of how Japan is different from other cultures or the U.S.
Yeah.
So, near where you used to live,
Musashi Kosugi,
yes, there was a baseball
diamond. Yeah.
Right. So there's a base, and one time I was walking by there, and there was a little league baseball team. So they're all kids, 8 to 10 years old, playing baseball, and there were obviously coaches, and they were talking a lot. But that, like in the U.S., baseball players are always talking at each other or to each other. That's happening. But every once in a while, there would be like some kind of a cheer or something, or the coach would say something, and all of the players would go, yeah, or they would say something. And I thought, what's going on? What are they doing? There's no occasion in American sports where everybody would kind of cheer together on the team.
Yeah. Sports are such a I don't want to say weird. It's such an interesting concept here because I think baseball is actually probably the best example because like when you look at baseball in the U.S., the way I would describe it is it feels like a team of individuals, right? You have like the star players on the team. It's like, oh, that guy's a huge slugger. That guy's a great guy in the outfield, or whatever. It's like you have these heroes on the team. Where, I mean, Japan definitely has heroes on the team, but like when you watch Japanese baseball here, it feels like people actually play as a team rather than like try to make these big flashy individual plays. Like a perfect example, I remember growing up and, like, okay, you guys are from Boston, so you guys have your baseball. I have the Mariners. They're not a good team, but you know what? They're near and dear to our hearts in Seattle.
It's okay, man. Not all of us can be the best, right?
But one thing we did have is we had Ichiro.
Yeah.
Right? And it was such a weird thing watching Ichiro play baseball in the U.S. because you're used to when you're watching American baseball, it's like you're the big focal point of watching people go up to bat is hitting a home run or hitting a double or triple. But Ichiro, he never really hit home runs. But every single time that guy went up to bat, he was always doing a single or a double. He was always making it to first or second base, right? And the man was consistent. And when you watch baseball here in Japan, it's very similar to that. You of course you will see home runs and stuff, but you see a lot of doubles and singles, right? And so like the whole emphasis is like, okay, look, I'm not going to try to go for the big play. I'm going to try and go for something I know I can get. And we're just going to keep making that progress, and little by little we'll score points.
Team. Yeah, because when you hit a home run, the glory goes to the guy who hit the home run.
Yeah,
but if you hit singles and doubles, it goes for the whole team.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've told you this already multiple times, but like the society here, from how I see it, is everyone has their role, everyone has their place, and you know the role you're supposed to do, and you don't necessarily have to go about being like super authentic, I guess, as long as you're just fulfilling your role in society. Like, you can be with your friends and hang out with your friends and do whatever you want, but when you're out in the public sphere, you have your place, you have your thing you're doing. And it, to me, when I first got here, it seemed really cold and empty. But now it's great because everything goes so smoothly. And it's like, I feel like before, when I was less secure in myself, I was like, I need more like humanity in my life. I need more human touch. I need more people to interact with me like I'm a human. But now it's like, I have friends.
Yeah.
I have a family.
I actually feel the complete opposite when I go back to the US.
Okay.
So
sorry. Okay.
So I actually, so for me, I've talked about a lot of the time on the channel that I feel very comfortable with the way of life here. Because for me, a big emphasis on the kind of person I am is I need social interaction when I go to work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the kind of person who I can't be alone and get stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
I need to be interacting with people in order to kind of get like motivation to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think here in Japan, that's a really great environment for that because even as a teacher, like I'm still usually working with other teachers. I'm communicating with somebody to do my job.
Mm-hmm.
And I often find that when I go back to the US, I get like this huge anxiety wave because in the US you're often expected to be able to do stuff independently.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even in your personal life, something as simple as like, getting your tires replaced or changing your oil or, handling that kind of thing, you need to get that done by yourself as an adult. Whereas here it's like there's so much more of a support network for helping people with their daily lives.
Yeah, it's like if you go to change the oil of your car, they'd be like, "Why are you changing your oil?
Yeah,
why don't you have someone do it?"
Or even gas.
Yeah, that's true. Gas
really?
too.
That's interesting.
Yeah. But then again, open plan offices were developed in Japan. And the cubicle was in the States, so I think that describes that pretty well.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll be honest, I would prefer a cubicle because I feel super naked when I am in those open.
Yeah.
It's such a weird thing because like obviously no one's paying attention to what anybody else is doing, but you feel so exposed.
It's okay, dude. I enjoyed it because I could watch you all day while you were working from my other side of the office.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh, it's gotten so much worse.
Well, we could save that for another time, man. I don't want you to lose your job. So
no.
I feel like we've talked about a lot of stuff. We didn't talk completely on topic, but we got to some good topics, and we're almost done. And I want to save this for you, Austin, for your ride home.
That ain't making it home. I can tell you right now.
So thanks to my student Mitsuko-san. Mitsuko-san.
Mitsuko, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This was a great choice. Yeah.
Perfect. Here's a hint. Please get the exact same bottle. Just get another one. That would be great. This is so delicious.
Yeah, it is pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll see you guys next time.
Yep.